Hi, I'm Aim Phoenix, and thank you for joining me today. I'm going to talk about disability, about being disabled, and about feeling disabled enough. It's a super nuanced subject and something I'd like to delve into more in future videos, but I'd like to share my experiences with disability. And I guess the easiest way to do this is start by listing my current disabilities and diagnoses. So currently I have depression, anxiety, CPTSD, endometriosis, adenomyosis, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, and possibly another yet to be diagnosed condition because I've been having some weird new symptoms lately. Fun. It's not like the longest list in the world, but it's also not to be trifled with. And I'm going to throw ADHD and autism into this mix as well, because they definitely impact my ability to function in various environments. I resisted describing myself as disabled for a really long time. It took my gynecology consultant writing a letter saying I was disabled for me to actually start believing it. And a couple of months after that happened, I had a breakdown and I had to deal yet again with my brain and my body not behaving in ways I was used to and learning how to adapt to that in a new way. So what is disability? What is it to be disabled? And why did I resist this for so long? So there are three main models of disability, and I'm leaning really heavily on a paper by Rappel and Dawodo called Conceptual Models of Disability as a source for this, because they've done a really great job of summarising it. Firstly, there's the medical model of disability, which says, something is wrong with you. You qualify for our aid. And it really quickly veers into, you have a defect. You must be fixed. And as somebody with worsening chronic conditions, this is incredibly frustrating in a lot of ways, especially when that's the approach and yet there's not a fix and there's not a cure. So it's very easy to feel excluded by this approach. Sometimes it can be incredibly validating for a trained medical professional to look at you and say, yes, there's something wrong. But I've also spent pretty much the last decade or so of my life in diagnosis hell. And I've been told my symptoms are all in my head, it's just my anxiety manifesting. And I was once told by a GP that she wouldn't diagnose my fibromyalgia because they couldn't fix it anyway, which was incredibly helpful and definitely not discouraging. It was bad. Okay. Next, we have the social model of disability, which again, it has its flaws, but it's a bit more of a holistic approach. This frames disability in an environmental context, saying that the illness itself doesn't cause a disability, but the lack of accommodation from society does. For example, I have ADHD and CPTSD, which means that a lot of loud noises of unexpected points can make things really difficult to me, and this varies from just being distracted and unfocused up to a full-on panic attack. I used to work in an office that was above a building site, which was what it was. These things happen. I told my manager that the noise was impacting my work and asked to be able to wear noise cancelling headphones, and I was told I couldn't because it wouldn't be fair on everyone else. In this situation, being able to wear the headphones would have made my symptoms manageable and mitigated any of the negative impact, but the harm was caused by being denied these adjustments. Similarly, a deaf person's ability to carry out particular tasks can depend on whether or not videos are captioned or whether there's somebody who can use sign language to talk with them. Finally, there's the individual environmental model, which I'll admit is the one I'm least familiar with, but it's basically a sort of mishmash of the previous two models. It takes into account the impairments, which are the illnesses or disorders themselves, the disabilities, which are the consequences of those illnesses, and the handicaps, which are the disadvantages that you experience because of the disabilities impairments. So, like, Z happens because Y is in place because X. Does that make sense? To walk it backwards. To use my previous example again, my ADHD and CPTSD are my illnesses. My disabilities were the energy it took to manage my symptoms and becoming incredibly panicked when hearing loud noises. And the handicaps were being told by my manager that I was underperforming. And it seems like, again, a pretty holistic approach. It takes into account what causes each impact. And when you're figuring out what part of what you're living with causes something, it's easier to respond to it. I've been thinking a lot about my relationship with disability lately. I've made a few friends through work and the internet, and through mutual friends since lockdown began, and because most of the time I'm staying home, I look less disabled than I did previously. And it's led to some people expressing surprise or more sympathy than I'm used to when I bring it up. Firstly, I'm quite touchy about this, because what does a disabled person even look like? I'm not currently a wheelchair user. Does this mean I don't look disabled? Sometimes I make use of my walking stick as a mobility aid, but I can walk unaided. Does this make me not seem disabled? My chronic pain flares up in ways which aren't as obvious as, say, a seizure. Does this mean it's less real because it's less seen? I'm generally a pretty cheerful person. Does this mean that I'm not vocally angry and bitter enough to be really disabled? I mean, obviously I am disabled, and rather than placing the blame on people who assume I'm not because of the above, I choose to blame those who have the power to control these narratives. I blame those with cultural and social clout who, when given the choice, tell stories of disability as tragedies or worse, cautionary tales. Be glad for the health that you have, because look how painful your life could be otherwise. Compare this to queer media. It's great to see more varied queer stories, especially those where queer characters have arcs unrelated to their gender or sexuality. But the damage done by decades of various censorship rules, meaning that queer stories had to be framed as tragic or doomed, persist. It took me a decade and a half to accept my lesbianism because of this ingrained homophobia, and I'll be unpacking that for years to come. Internalised ableism is quite similar. It doesn't do anyone any favours. I think that's mostly why I avoided self-describing as disabled for so long. That and the discrimination faced when I tell people I'm disabled. Let me prove I'm competent and that my life is full of things I love, and oh, by the way, none of this is less true because I'm disabled. And I can get quite defensive about that, and in turn it takes quite a lot of mental energy to unpack why I get so defensive. To go back to these models of disability, these attitudes about disability are part of what causes the handicaps. Like, maybe my depression isn't the problem here. Maybe it's the way someone treats me like a glass ornament that could shatter at any moment because of it that's making this situation difficult. These models can be applied to a personal relationship just as effectively as they can to systemic issues. And it can also be applied to your relationship with yourself. And honestly, it's been an absolute gift to prove my assumptions about what it is to be disabled wrong. I'm able to identify and accommodate for my needs. That's the social model making my life easier for myself. And it's made me a better advocate for myself and hopefully for others in medical settings. Right now I'm kind of a mixed bag in terms of how I'm doing. I've developed this mystery joint pain, which means I'm in agony if I stand up for more than 5 minutes, which is why I have takeaway on the way rather than cooking dinner tonight. I'm an adult, I can do what I want. But I work from home at the moment because of, the world. And that means I'm able to rest adequately more frequently than I have been doing previously. And I don't really need to push my limits regularly. In the rare chance you see me in the outside world, you'll probably see me using my walking stick. If you see me and my stick hobbling away throughout the streets of Oxford, then rather than your sympathy, I'd ask for a quick, "Hey, you remembered to use your stick today. Good job for doing what you need to make the world more accessible for you. Good job for looking out for your future self and minimising pain." I know I'm happiest when my world is widest, and accepting a holistic approach to my own disabilities, as well as those of others, makes my world so much bigger. I'd love to make more video content about disability advocacy and queer content and media literacy and other things I happen to know about. But this is probably going to be on a super ad hoc basis because I'm really great at sticking to plans I make. If you have anything you'd like me to make a video about or talk about, let me know and I'll see what I can do. Have a lovely day and stay safe.